What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Shake Chatterjee, and welcome to Life is Blurry. Today, we have an amazing guest, Rodrigo Garcia Platas, and all kinds of interesting things to cover surrounding the biology of attraction. Why do we like who we like? There's a lot of different reasons, ranging from societal cues like money, status, security, and obviously biologic cues, creating offspring that are designed to survive. So Rodrigo has a master's in educational psychology, a master's in family systemic therapy, and he's an expert in systemic psychology and Unani biotypes. So as a veterinarian myself, I'm very interested in what Rodrigo has to say regarding why it is humans are attracted to one another. I have a good idea for why in the animal kingdom, animals choose their mates, but I'm sure there's a lot of ways that animals and humans overlap. So Rodrigo, what would you say about the overlap of attraction between animals and humans?
It's such a fascinating topic. Well, first, thank you for having me, my friend. This is a really fun conversation to have. Now, it's true that there's a lot of things that are biological about our attraction, and we know it through biotypes. Like biotypes is the understanding of human beings through their biology. And even though it's something that the Greeks started creating and Islamic medicine took to a medical level, and then when it joined ancient Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, it became the Unani tip that we know today as medicine. And even though we've had this information for a really long time, even though we know Unani biotypes exist, the big problem is that we stopped paying attention to it. But biologically, it is true. Opposites attract. And even when we think of it like generations ago, when we think of our grandparents, when we think of our great-grandparents, there was always this stereotypical couple. Like if you think of a German couple, the stereotypical German or just Northern European, Scandinavian couple, you're probably imagining a choleric man with a phlegmatic woman. They're opposites, they're from the same axis, they're opposites biologically, and they usually attract each other because they compensate each other beautifully. One of them wants results and strength, the other one wants relationships and family, and they really teach each other like the way they understand life, the way they understand relationships, the way they understand goals, and they complement each other beautifully. If you thought of the typical Southern European couple, Italian couple, Spanish couple, what you're thinking of probably is a sanguine man and a melancholic woman, because opposites attract and they balance each other out, both psychologically and biologically. Because what you're saying is very true. We know that even in humans, if you start inbreeding and you don't bring new genes that balance out everything, you start having disconnections of recessive genes. Like to give a simple example, you gave good ones, but to give another simple example, cystic fibrosis and Caucasians. If two Caucasian people are having children, many times they need to take a test to know if they have the gene for cystic fibrosis. Because if both of them have it, there's a really high % chance that their kid will have cystic fibrosis. And it only happens between two Caucasians. It happens with recessive genes when you don't bring new genes into the gene pool. It's 100%
So that's really interesting because, you know, as a veterinarian, I can't help but think about purebred dogs and mutts. Golden retrievers, great dogs, one of my favorite breeds, but it's really sad. They die early. They die at like 8 or 9. They get splenic cancer. They get bone cancer, osteosarcomas. So it's interesting because these mutts, the shelter dog that's been, you know, mixed with just about everything, they live to like 15 or 16. And I have an understanding from a genetic perspective why that is. It's because of, we call it in the animal kingdom, hybrid vigor, which basically means the more diversified your genes are, the higher chances you have are for survival. So very interesting to hear that this is also very, very true on the human side of things. And that's something that I was kind of aware of and I've brought up previously. Maybe I didn't bring it up the right way. So I'm actually very excited to have you here as an expert in the field because I think you'll do a better job of articulating how and why it applies to humans.
Here's the thing. Humans have fallen in love with personality. and our identity, which doesn't happen in the limbic system, where this type of attraction that you're talking about exists. It's true that we've been in an international scientific debate for a while, about pheromones and if opposites attract, et cetera, because it's just not fashionable anymore. And it's not a race thing. Like, it has nothing to do with race. Like, we have biotypes in every race, and they're the same biotypes. It's a species. It's a species thing. But the really interesting thing is where we separate from animals, and this is very relevant in today's world, is because we don't really fall in love biologically anymore. Like, people rarely do that. We still feel certain attraction because of it, but we don't really fall in love through that. We fall in love through our human brain, our neocortex and our prefrontal cortex. And the brain works in a fascinating way in humans. Like, I have a kid, I have a 1-year-old, and even though I've studied this for a long time, many times we're not ready for everything that we're going to be presented with when we have kids. And parenting, like, the secret of parenting, this is my opinion, but the secret of parenting is teaching your kid as they start growing older how to, like, self-govern and self-adjust the lower layers of the brain with the higher levels and layers of the brain. So your reptilian brain, and I'm sure you know a lot about this. The reptilian brain is our fight or flight, and it gets triggered and we feel like the world is ending and we forget about everything because now we're in the reptilian brain. Your limbic system needs to be able to calm down your reptilian brain, because if not, we would all just react like every other animal, fight or flight, just instinct, attack in many ways. Then we have mammals and the limbic system that's created with that. That's where our connection, most of our emotions exist, where our attachment to other human beings and many of the impulses that we have, like, for example, drug addiction happens in the limbic system. And then if the limbic system is not controlled by the neocortex, the human brain, and your prefrontal cortex, where your identity is, then the impulses of getting your fix are more important than understanding that this is not a good idea, because higher thought, reasoning happens in the neocortex. The thing is, now we seem to fall in love more through the neocortex than through the limbic system. And what I believe is true is that both things need to be aligned in a certain way for a relationship to actually work and happen. Because if not, it will feel like a constant battle of having to calm a part of me that doesn't agree with 90% of what's happening in this relationship.
Rodrigo, we use a higher, the neocortex, we use a more sophisticated area of our brain to fall in love now, yet we still need those more animalistic desires in order for a relationship to work. One may have kind of taken the lead, but it doesn't mean that the other is irrelevant. It's still very much relevant.
It is relevant, but what's like this is up to debate in many ways, because we don't like to admit this, but there's so much that we don't know about the brain. Like, we know a lot about the neocortex because it's the outermost layer of the brain, and that's what we've studied the most, but we don't really have like the most amazing technology when it comes to understanding the deeper layers of the brain. But what is true is that when you date someone at the beginning, what we're looking for is cues of our belief system in this person. So let me break this down a little bit, because I believe that 90% of people that fall in love today actually fall in love in something that we call traumatic compatibility. Like, your trauma needs to be compatible in order to stay together. And this is how, I promise you, like, around 98% of the world creates relationships right now. Like, I don't want to say 100%, but we're really close. Because that feeling of falling in love that we experience, those butterflies in the stomach, I call it a gut pull, because it feels like something's pulling you from your gut and telling you this is the right choice. This is what you should be looking for. That's egoic. That comes from your ego. Like, falling in love with someone, not seeing them, for example, or just texting them, for example, or like, you're only giving information to your neocortex. So the only way to fall in love with someone without actually experiencing them is through traumatic compatibility. In other words, if I have a specific trauma about something and you portray it in a beautiful way, even though this is the source of most of my pain in my past, it feels familiar. I know this. I know how this works. And when we fall in love is because we find someone that seems to be the manifestation, the human manifestation of most of our trauma and beliefs growing up. That's why people tend to follow patterns. Like, if I decided really early on in my life that men are abusive, because that's the information and images that I was exposed to, then when I find an abusive man, something inside of me is going to tell me that this man is real. Like, this is a real human being. This is the reality
because it confirms what you already thought.
And if you put me,
you're essentially confirming your prior belief.
That's 100% true. It's cognitive validation. And we love it because human beings love control. Our neocortex is in love with being in control. I always tell people, if you don't believe me, just hide the remote in your house and see what happens. Like, even with simple things like that, we're that addicted to control. And if you place someone in front of me that's perfect, like the closest thing to a perfect man, a perfect woman, a perfect human being in general, but they do not line up with the beliefs that I created in order to survive and understand life growing up, I will reject them. And I will feel like there's something wrong about them.
That's very, very interesting. So compatible trauma, I can see how that works, because people who, share similar ways of growing up, perhaps, divorced parents, things like that, they tend to be attracted to one another. And listen to this, you're going to find this interesting. So both my mom and my dad, they both lost their dads when they were young. And I always thought that was...
I'm sorry for laughing, but that's really
I always
common.
thought that was so interesting because, without getting into the scientific nature of it, I just thought, wow, okay, that's something they have in common. But now you bring this aspect of shared trauma. It's not just something you have in common. It's a shared trauma. And that's way more powerful than, we have the same favorite restaurant,
Yeah. It starts with simple things like that, but like traumatic compatibility is a little bit more complex than that. That's true, but this is hard to understand for a few people. But because of your background, I'm pretty sure that you're going to get it right away. I've worked with like 100,000 people worldwide. I've been like coaching people and working with people. I'm a licensed therapist in Mexico, but I've been traveling all over the world doing workshops. I'm like the only Catholic therapist that has permission to work with the Jewish Orthodox community of Latin America. And I do a lot of couples counseling. And something that we find is that in the past 15 years of my life, I haven't been able to encounter one couple that's together right now that are not together like initially because of traumatic compatibility. Like, I know that I have a little skew on the people that I see, because when you look for help, you're already in trouble. So I take that into account too. But traumatic compatibility works like this. It's not necessarily that we went through the same trauma. I laughed a little bit with what you were saying, because that's literally my parents' story. They didn't like completely lose their father, but both my parents had this huge void of father figure. My dad, because he lost contact with his dad from 6 to 17, and my mom, because she comes from a northern Spain family that was very misogynistic, and she's the only woman in her generation. So they both experienced like this lack of attention of father figure, and that definitely like creates an initial connection. But then for the relationship to actually work, you need something else. In fact, let's talk about this like briefly. In systemic psychology, we have a principle, which is the principle of attachment. What are the things that create the most attachment in human beings? What are the emotions or experiences that create the deepest and strongest attachment in human beings? What do you think that is?
Nostalgia.
I'm giving time to the audience.
Is it their memory? Is it like something that they've experienced that they look for in the future?
It happens through the hypothalamus, and it has to do with memory and nostalgia, but there are very specific like experiences or emotions. Number 3, the third thing that creates the most attachment between human beings is love.
Oh, well, I should have guessed.
Number 3. That's only the third strongest.
It's only the third strongest.
Like,
so
like
would you say
force.
that love is not enough to make a relationship work? Love alone?
Well, we know that to be true in systemic psychology.
Just wanted to get that.
Like literally one of the most important, literally one of the most important book in systemic psychology, written by Bert Hellinger, and that I always recommend. I don't know the name in English, but in Spanish it's called Órdenes del Amor, Orders of Love. It's a hard to get book, but it's fascinating. And it's called Orders of Love because in systemic psychology, we know that love out of order is one of the most painful things that a family or a relationship can experience. Like in today's world, we tend to assume that as long as there's love, then there's not a problem. And the truth is that love out of order can destroy a system for several generations.
Love that. We're gonna clip that and we're gonna make it a reel and a TikTok and we're gonna post it. That's a great little clip. Love that.
I'll give you an example of it because it's very easy to understand. Like systemic psychology is beautiful, but it's a completely new logic about human beings and their interactions. So at the beginning, it's a little bit challenging, but once you start getting like the gist of it and understanding that there's different levels and different positions for every family, it's not the same to be the father of a system than to be the son of the system, than to be the daughter, than being. Okay, let me put it this way. Systemic psychology is the understanding of human beings as part of a complex system. In other words, like normal psychology wants to understand, like if you think of psychoanalysis, like we want to understand the human being as an individual that went through certain things, decided certain things, created certain beliefs that created certain patterns in their life. But it's a very individual process. It's a very like alone process. When you understand human beings as connected to other people, then you understand that a lot of the things that we do don't really have to do with trauma itself, but with balancing out the system. Like a family works like the human body. If I lose my eyesight, my body will try to overcompensate with certain things. Other senses will become more acute. And I was like firsthand exposed to this. My grandfather on my mother's side was blind for the last 13, 14 years of his life. So most of the grandfather that I remember was blind. And he could tell who was in the house by listening to the footsteps. In fact, my spine exploded at some point in my life, and I didn't even realize it because I'm a sanguine. We can talk about that later if you want. But the first one that told me there's something wrong with how you're walking was my grandfather, because he realized that there was something wrong in the way I was walking, and he could hear it because I was losing like nervous strength on my right leg. And he was the first one to realize it because his hearing was so acute. He would know how much a bill was just by touching them, by feeling the fabric of the bill. And we say fabric because they're mostly made of cotton. But he knew exactly how they felt. And that's how your body balances. Like if you lose a leg, your hip changes position, your other leg strengthens in different ways. That's how a system looks for balance. Families are exactly the same. If suddenly something dramatic happens in a family, people readjust within the system in order to kind of save the system, to make everyone else feel okay. The most typical example that we see of this is I constantly get coaches and students in my trainings that keep saying the same thing. When my dad left, when my mom left, or when one of my parents passed away, as the elder in the family, I decided to start supporting the other parent and getting the rest of my siblings off the ground and creating their own lives and paying for their education. I sacrificed my own life so that they could be better. They could have a better life. And for some reason, I gave it all, and they resent me for it. They think that I'm arrogant. They don't like me for having done that. And I literally sacrificed myself for them. And I explained to them, yeah, like in systemic psychology, we actually have the answer to that. Because in the moment you started trying to become a parent for your siblings, you disrespected the system. You're not acting like an equal from their generation. And you disrespected your parent too by treating them like an equal. And because no one explains this logic to us, we never really understand what's happening here. So in systemic psychology, we understand the positions and the levels of attachment.
Based on systemic psychology, is it possible to form a meaningful enough connection to spend your life with somebody without having seen them?
I guess you could, but it would be a partial connection. Because I think this will make sense. Like coming back to the levels of attachment that we were talking about, number 3 that creates attachment is love. So clearly love sometimes is not enough. And as we talked about in systemic psychology, love out of order is one of the most dangerous things you can have because it's a strong force of attachment for everyone in the system. Then we have level 2, something that creates attachment even more than love. And this is going to be interesting, I believe, for you and for a lot of the people listening.
I knew it.
Sex.
Lust, I was going to say, but yeah, okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yes. That's why we all know a lot of couples that have a horrible relationship, but as long as they're having good sex, they'll stay together. And that's also why people get on planes to go around the world to go sleep with someone.
That's very interesting.
Like nothing creates the attachment when it comes to just emotions. There's only one that creates more attachment than sex. These are the typical passion relationships that we see. People that fight like crazy and then they make up and they have amazing sex and then they want to kill each other again, but then they make up and they have sex again. That's a typical passion relationship based on sex attachment.
Can that type of relationship survive?
Yes, we have a lot of them that survive.
Okay,
they're not healthy and they're not good for the people involved. Definitely.
Okay, well, I don't want to skip anything, but what's the number one thing? Money?
No.
Okay, let's hear it.
Anger.
Oh, anger.
Nothing creates attachment in human beings like anger. And if you think about it, it makes total sense. Like even one of my teachers used to say, love someone and you'll want to be with that person a couple of times a day, but hate someone, get mad at someone, and you just suit this person to your face for the rest of the day. They will be the only thing that you want to talk about. You'll get on a cab. The cab driver will ask you, how's your day going? And you'll go like, you have no idea what my boss did to me. You'll get home. You have no idea what my boss did to me. It's even in marketing, we know it. Like if you have a store or a restaurant and you give the best service in the world, people will talk about it like briefly. Like people will talk about it for a little while, maybe 3-5 times in the next month. But if you have a restaurant and you give the worst service in the world, people will talk about how horrible your restaurant is for years.
You don't have to tell attachment. Me. They've been talking about me for weeks and weeks here, and I don't think it's because of my excellent service on the show. So yeah, that's interesting.
I can actually explain a little bit of why that is if you want to go into it a little bit. Here's the thing. You're a very interesting case. You really are. Like you're a fascinating human being when it comes to our understanding in RGP development of what we do. So let me explain a little bit of what we do. Because I started as a transformational coach, I started really young. When I was 23, I was already traveling around the world doing transformational trainings everywhere. And most of the people that I was working with were way older than me. But because of my own personal trauma, I was really good at that because it was a defense mechanism that I created as a kid to read people, understand what's going on with them. So I just started polishing it and really supporting people in many ways. And I fell in love with it. But then I went into psychology, and then finally I went into systemic psychology that gave me a new understanding of relationships, and finally into biotypes, because biotypes allow you to just look at one person and know exactly who 70% of them are and how their health works. What you can do with dogs by just looking at them. Like you look at a Chihuahua dog, you look at a German Shepherd, and you know how the temperament works. Human beings have temperaments too. They're not as important as they are in animals because we have a lot more personality.
I don't know about
animals.
That.
But they're still extremely relevant.
Bandit has quite a personality. I don't know. It might be a tie for some of these dogs.
I mean, what defines their behavior is a little bit less personality and more temperament, more instinct. But they still have personalities. Of course, it applies. And personalities can be amazing in animals too. People that have pets know it. Like my partner's dog, Walter, is like a love magnet. We can be walking around the street and people just get up from their tables and walk to the dog to hug the dog.
I love that.
It's crazy. So yes, I've seen it in action many times. But what we wanted to do with the work that we do in RGP development is put all these theories together. So we got the disc study of personality, all we know about psychology, all we know about transformational coaching, with the principles of systemic psychology, understanding people through their biology. It sounds complex. It took me a decade to put it together. We finally validated it with Tec de Monterrey in Mexico and gave us a 93% accuracy rate in how we read and understand people. We're working with big universities in the States too. We want to create precision medicine and precision psychological interventions for different biological people. It's beautiful. It's respecting our differences, understanding them, and celebrating them in the most amazing way. And this has, again, nothing to do with race. We have biological structures in all different races. Now, having explained that, we're all used to seeing people through their biotype and assuming certain things. Like even if we don't know Unani biotypes, usually what happens is that our brain is a data analytics computer and we've been pattern recognizing things for decades in our lives. So you look at someone and you assume certain things about how they should act because of how they look, because you've seen more people like that and you've had many experiences in your life with human beings. So you look at them and you assume certain things. When they act exactly as they look, what we experience is something called egoic harmony. My ego is in harmony because I can feel comfortable and trust this human being because what I predicted about them and how they're acting matches. But because we don't know how to explain this, we usually just say, I like this person's energy. I like their vibe. Like this resonates with me, because we have no idea how else to say it. This is also the reason why we've worked with movie studios and TV networks down here in Mexico and in the States to help them choose the right actor or actress for a specific character. We sit down with the writers and we say, explain the character and we'll tell you exactly how this person needs to look like. Because when you choose a wrong biotype to portray a character, people experience cognitive dissonance. Like that's not how a person that looks like that acts. And then they just think that the actor is really bad. And most of the times they just have to do that. You chose the wrong biotype.
That makes sense. I can see how, okay, so I'm a veterinarian, and
yes,
there's a lot of me that's soft and fuzzy and caring, but I don't act that way. That's not my personality.
I know that. That's exactly what I'm explaining. Right. That's exactly what I'm explaining about you, and that's what makes it hard.
I think it irritates people because they're like, wait, you look like this and this is your job, but you don't act like that.
That's exactly right.
Well, please, I would love to learn more about this. Now that we're talking about me, I'm very interested.
Okay, let me break it down a little bit because I've given this some thought. You're not an easy case, my friend. You're a deep, complex human being in many ways. So the beginning is this. You're phlegmatic. You're very skinny for a phlegmatic, but you're phlegmatic. And phlegmatics live through emotion. We're all used to like experiencing phlegmatics and feeling love coming out of them. Phlegmatics overgive like crazy. Phlegmatics are the best friends. Phlegmatics are the like uncertified therapists that God sent us for everyone to open up and tell you their life story. That's why even when you're acting arrogant, even when you're acting like you don't want people to come close to you, they still do. And they still tell you their life story because you're phlegmatic. No matter how shut down or arrogant you want to look, people will always resonate with phlegmatics. And you're phlegmatic, my friend. That's why you're a vet. That's why you have a pure heart. That's why you actually really do care about animals and human beings in general, but your personality gets in the way because you don't have the typical personality of a phlegmatic. You are an analyzing phlegmatic. And an analyzing phlegmatic is someone that acts like another biotype. You act like a melancholic, and melancholics live in their head, overanalyze everything. They take a while to process information. They don't take risks very easily. They don't just speak what they're thinking. They usually take a while. They second guess themselves all the time. So you're actually phlegmatic, but you act like an explosive melancholic. You act like a melancholic with so much certainty and so much mom, which is something that never happens. When I say so much mom, that's also a systemic principle that I can explain in a couple of minutes if you want. Well, I can explain it now.
Yeah, why not? I mean, this is my biotype we were talking about, right?
Because sometimes
this
people...
is like, just to recap, I'm a phlegmatic with the behavior of an explosive melancholic. Okay.
Yes.
That seems to make sense.
Yes. And I think I know why. Like what's fascinating about what we do is that when you know someone's biotype and you know their personality, we've mapped out exactly what someone needs to go through to become that type of personality, even though they're another biotype. So we want to remove human interpretation from psychological diagnosis. That's literally our end goal. Now, the thing with you is that you're one biotype, phlegmatic, live in your heart, value relationships, hides in sadness and depression. That's typical of your biotype. But your personality does not act like that at all. You act like an analyzing phlegmatic. And analyzing is a typical personality of the melancholic biotype. They live in their head. They overanalyze everything. It's not easy for them to trust. They value intellectual certainty and hide in fear. The thing is, even though you have an analyzing personality that should make you act exactly like a melancholic, you don't. Because you act like you overthink things like a melancholic. You pay attention to things like a melancholic. Your perception is pretty good. And I watched like the whole show, my friend. Like you obviously notice certain things that most people are afraid to even call out or to even say. But when a melancholic does something like that, it takes them a while. They want to be very safe. They say it in a way that doesn't create the problem, that doesn't make anyone else get triggered. But you don't do that. And that has a lot to do with your self-worth, my friend. And your self-worth is what we in systemic psychology call mom. It's not about mom itself. So in order for the audience to understand this, in systemic psychology, we say that someone has a lot of mom or very little mom when we're actually talking about their self-worth, their value, their self-esteem.
So this is not mom,
when
M-O-M,
we're talking about...
But it's not mother.
Mom, M-O-M, because it comes from...
It is mother. Okay.
It is mother, but it comes from your interpretation of your
interesting.
mother.
Yeah, my mom's super self-confident. She speaks her mind. You know, she's a little bit more tactful than me, I would say. But yeah, she has high self-worth for sure. Yeah,
clearly. So the thing is this. If I here's the secret for people not to get confused. This has nothing to do with if your parents were around or what your parents did. Like, there's no direct connection between the actual event that you went through and who you became as an adult. There is a bridge in the middle, which is interpretation. The meaning that I gave to things. This is a reason why siblings, even identical twins that were born in the same family, in the same house, went to the same school, end up creating different personalities because it's not based literally on the events, but the interpretation of the events. Of course, events are important because they become the source of what I'm trying to give meaning to, but it's not the end decision. It's actually the meaning that I create after that defines me. So, in other words, whatever my mom did, if I interpreted my mother's actions, even if what she did was abandon me, if I interpret her actions and justify them and give it a meaning that she had to do it because she loves me, then I'm going to grow up with a personality that looks like a personality with a lot of mom, as we say in systemic psychology, which just means that if you felt like that your mother's actions had to do with love, then who you are is worthy because everything she did was
for sure, 100%.
And then your self-worth, and then your self-worth and how you act and how you can unfold in life is like someone who feels like they're $1 million. And then on the other side, we have dad. That is not internal confidence as mom. That is external confidence. What that gives me, what that gives me is my confidence in my abilities and my talents, in what I can do. In who I can be in the world. When someone has a lot of dad, for example, they can stand on a stage, no problem. They can talk to 1,000 people, no problem. They want you to see them creating stuff and doing stuff because they think that they're amazing at it. So that is external confidence and mom is internal confidence. The thing is, you have the personality of a biotype that usually has no mom. That takes a while to make up their mind and present their argument. And it's hard for them to trust people and to trust that people will understand what they're saying because they usually have very deep internal worlds. And they usually don't have a lot of mom, but you have a lot of mom. And I think I have a theory of how you can have that personality with still having a lot of mom. And it has to do with the fact that and tell me if I'm wrong in this, but it has to do with the fact that you felt loved, but you rejected important parts of your culture.
Well, it's when you put it like that, it's more complicated than that. I wouldn't say that I rejected important parts of my culture, even though inadvertently that did happen. I'm the type of person that anything that I get asked to do, asked to be a part of, anything at all, I'm gonna go through it with a fine-tooth comb and think about why. Why is this important? What is the significance of this? I always ask myself, am I doing this because people expect me to do it, because everyone else is doing it, because it's a tradition, or is there significance for it? And I've never felt comfortable doing something just because everyone else is doing it. And, being on the show is a perfect example where to some degree we were kind of expected to go along with something, but I just felt it didn't fit. It didn't make sense. It was, I don't want to say fake, but it wasn't authentic. Let's put it that way. It wasn't authentic to me. And so I didn't feel comfortable being, committing to it fully. How about that? So same thing with my culture. It's not that I don't find value in it, but I felt like it's like this. Yeah. Because I'm born with this color skin in this part of the world, I automatically have to subscribe to this way of thinking. that doesn't jive with
Yep.
me. If I can independently understand this way of thinking and I decide to subscribe to it, then I'm all for it. But I won't do it just because of the things I didn't choose where I was born, how I was born, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I could have been born in Brazil or something, or in Russia, or
in Scandinavia,
anywhere. I don't think where you're born determines how you have to think. And that's kind of what I think culture is to some degree. And I stand against that,
Mm-hmm.
As cheesy as it sounds, I'm a citizen of the world. I'm just making my own decisions as I go based on the information that I have. So it's not that I'm against my culture. I think I'd probably, if I was born into any other culture, I'd probably have something to say about that too.
Yeah. And when I say rejecting things of your culture, I don't mean like saying, oh, I don't want to be this or I don't want to be that. We all kind of reject certain things of our culture. The thing is, most of us don't analyze it as much as you, or have the like internal confidence and value and self-worth to just say it. Yeah, like you're actually validating my read beautifully, because you're telling me I have the brains to actually think about the things that I want to do, what all analyzers do. I think what's the motivation of why I'm doing it, as all analyzers do. I don't follow fashion. I actually ask myself what makes sense for me, as all analyzers do. But the difference with you, my friend, is you say it.
And it gets me in huge trouble. Trust me, it does. Yeah.
Yes, it does. Because we're not used to people that think like that to be vocal about it.
And I want to change that. Personally, I want to be that voice. As much of the internet that hates me, there's a surprising amount of people that really seem to like what I have to say because they're thinking it, but like you said, they don't necessarily have the confidence to say it. And it's interesting because so many people are messaging mean things to me, even to my mom, to my girlfriend. But in real life, when they meet me, it's all love and it's all praise. So it's just very interesting that these, it's very clear that the people who feel the same way as I do, they're not always the ones that are willing to speak up on it, even though they do feel that way. Maybe when they see me in person, they're comfortable saying it. But, when it comes to posting it online, there are people that do support, but it's not nearly the number of people that are comfortable hating online.
Mm-hmm. And we see a lot of that. Like, for example, within psychology, we have Jordan Peterson, who's someone that has been very vocal about a lot of things. He's a cleric. That's why he's so vocal. But he dares to say a lot of things that people might be thinking or questioning or asking about gender equality, about gender outcome, like so many things that maybe other people are thinking, but no one dares to say them unless they're a cleric. The thing is that it doesn't really surprise us that a cleric does it. But when a phlegmatic does it with the analyzing power of a melancholic, that's really confusing for a lot of people. That's why you're a complex system on your own, my friend, because you're a phlegmatic, so you care about people, but you act like a melancholic. An analyzer, you really pay attention to things, and you trust your mind like an analyzer, but you actually have enough to be vocal about it and to really care about it and to give yourself to it. And that puts you at risk, but it gives voice to a lot of people. And
that's fantastic. Too. It's an honor. Whatever combination that I am, it's an honor, despite all the hate. If I can do this, if I can be the voice, then that's fantastic. But I did want to ask you another thing. Do you feel that attraction is a choice?
Yes and no. That's a hard question. Okay, so at the beginning, when you don't have a clear awareness of yourself, your trauma, how you work, and the patterns that you follow, saying that attraction is a choice is a fool's errand. Because then what you end up choosing is based on your beliefs. And remember that beliefs are subconscious. You cannot just walk up to someone and tell them, what are the beliefs that are guiding your life? Because they don't know. Ortega y Gasset, the Spanish philosopher, was the first one to start defining this. And in his book, Ideas versus Beliefs, he started saying, my ideas are mine. I own them. I'm aware of them. I can share them. I can transform them. but I belong to my beliefs, and I am completely unaware of the existence of my beliefs. They're absolutely subconscious. I have no idea how they work, but I just literally react to the world like if it's absolutely true. Like this is the reality about the world. If I already decided that women are a certain way, I will only allow women that are a certain way. If I already decided that men are a certain way, that all men are liars, then I will only be comfortable with people like that, like the validation that we were talking about before. So when someone is not aware of their beliefs and the patterns that they follow, and you ask them to choose their attraction, in 90% of the chances, what they'll end up doing is just choosing something that makes them suffer and feel honorable for choosing that, even if it feels like suffering.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a widely known fact that I date blondes. I like blondes. That's that's a thing. But that is in no way or shape meant to be construed as I don't like other types. I think so many different types of women are beautiful. So many different types. Honestly, I can find something beautiful about any woman that I see. But for me, and I don't know if you have an explanation for this, for me, it was the novelty of a blonde woman to me that was exciting. Because, I was born in India, and it was, most people looked like me. And then when I came to America, it was just such a shocking difference that it was exciting. And it's the same reason, a lot of white friends I have, they're interested in Asian girls, or black women to white guys, or white guys to black women, or whatever. It's that novelty. But what I firmly believe is it's not just a conscious novelty, but there's also, at a biologic level, there's a drive there to diversify our gene pool. And I know you said even within different races, there's different types that factor into attraction. But I think that whole paradigm is heightened by the fact that now we have this, exotic nature of the person that we're dating. It's so different than what we grew up with, and that's attractive to a lot of us. I don't know if systemic psychology can explain any of that, or if it's separate.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So first, one of the things that get us in trouble is not understanding the linguistic distinction between choosing and deciding. So people in the world today seem to decide way more than they choose. Decide comes from Latin decidere, that means to cut out. So when you decide about something, like if you ask me, why did you choose whatever in your life? Why did you choose living here? Why did you choose this car? People are so used to deciding that deciding means cutting out other possibilities. So we assume in today's world that if I choose something, it means that I cut out other possibilities because I saw them as less than. And that's not true. Like if I go to the ice cream store and I ask for vanilla ice cream, if I live in a world where everything is about deciding, cutting out other possibilities, and you ask me, Rodrigo, why did you choose vanilla? I'm probably going to tell you because I don't like chocolate and they don't have strawberry. So I chose this because I cut out other possibilities that were better. And that's how most people think that we all decide. But the truth is that we actually choose. We justify our choices, and then it sounds like we're deciding, but we're not deciding. And choice has nothing to do with other possibilities. If I go to the ice cream store and I'm someone who chooses in life, and you ask me, why are you choosing vanilla? I'm going to tell you because I love vanilla.
It doesn't say...
I'm not comparing it to anything
else. There's nothing
else.
Bad about chocolate or strawberry. It's just you like vanilla, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that analogy.
And it's the difference between choosing and deciding. We're not deciding and comparing because attraction is so complex that's almost impossible to break down in a way where you go can you choose this just because? And just to finish the answer that I was giving you before, there is a space in which I believe that choice works in relationships. And I actually teach this. I have a full workshop about this. Once you understand your trauma well enough, once you understand your personality and your patterns well enough, then you can start choosing someone that works both for your ego and your true self, your biology and your true self. That's literally how I proposed to my wife. That's how the first time I saw my wife, I told her, I'm going to marry you.
Wow.
Like in that instant.
Yeah, I can relate.
And you're like, yeah, right, you. She was like, yeah, right, you Mexico City sweet talker, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, for real, I'm going to marry you. Because I actually teach people how to choose someone that's good enough for your ego to stay attracted to them. And I believe this will open a whole new interesting conversation about attraction, but enough for you to be attracted to the person, but enough for you to have a healthy foundation. So the things that are good for us, for our personality and for our ego, usually feel boring. And being able to distinguish the types of things that you can choose and have in a relationship without them being boring takes a process. Like it's a working on yourself that's really important that most people have never done. And then understanding your patterns well enough.
I feel like we're getting into a very, very interesting topic, and it would be a shame to dive into this and then cut it off short. So this has been incredible. This has been eye-opening, educational, all of the above. I would love it, Rodrigo, if we could have you back for a part 2, because there's a lot we didn't cover. Yeah? Okay.
I would love that.
Awesome.
We have a lot.
Well, then you heard it here. We're going to have Rodrigo back for a part 2. But as far as this episode of Life is Blurry, we are coming to a close. So thank you again. We are going to have Rodrigo's contact information available for you. He is doing great work around the world. So please don't hesitate to reach out to him. Is there anything you want to say about how you prefer to be contacted, Rodrigo? Jump in here.
Yes, they can follow us on Instagram or TikTok in RGP Development. Our site is rgpdevelopment.com. In our Instagram, we do lives and we do live readings, like looking at people and telling them about them, which is amazing, just literally by looking at them 10 seconds on the screen and telling them things about their past. And we also have an amazing podcast, my amazing partner, Mr. Ross Everett, also with Brian McElhaney, who's also an amazing comedian. We have a podcast where we try to discuss the deepest things about psychology, humans, relationships through the lens of psychology, systemic psychology, Unani biotypes, with all the fun of comedy. So they can look for Biotypical wherever they listen to podcasts.
Biotypical. Love that name. What a fitting name for what you do. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, life is blurry.